evening, everyone, and welcome to another installment of TED Excellence, the show in which I'm constantly going to prison to find out why it keeps being taken away. And I come to you live from the Crater Valley on the moon with Dog Cat Fox, a Pepperjack, and all of you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome again to Thursday, tempestuous Thursday. And certainly it has been for me. Went through a migraine earlier today. I've been a little off kilter most of the day as a consequence of that. So hopefully I'm on even keel right now for the wonderful broadcast that is TED Excellence. And boy, oh boy, do I have a lot to say about tonight's presentation before I even start it. But before I get there, who's joining me this evening on this beautiful Thursday evening? Evening. Yes, who is here? Well, before I even start, holy cats, Derek LaRue, thank you so much, as always, for your continued generosity and support. I really, really do appreciate it. Hope you're having a good evening this evening, and hope the show is worthy of your, I say generosity, support, what's another good word? Your benevolence. There we go. Your benevolence, your patronage. There we go. Trying to reestablish my vocabulary before I go any further into this. But eitherwise, who else is here with us tonight? Kiefer Dam, hello. John Miller, hello. Tyrannus Alexandrius the Invictus Lich, hello. Simon Willikins, hello. And then the chat jumped because, of course, it did. Ryan R, hello. Jack Frost, hello. Noah Asensio, hello. Did I already say Mike R? Mike R, Ryan R, the two R's. They're just the R brothers. What can I tell you? Liesel7, hello. Resolute Germ, hello. Useless Cook, hello. Dixie Rose 63, hello. Can't believe I finally caught a live stream. Well, I can't believe you did either. I'm happy to see you here. Who else is here? Tall Person, hello. Spudgun, hello. Little Mo Sizzlack, hello. Pissed Off Shih Tzu, hello. Twisted Skipster, hello. Shell D, hello. And I think that's everybody I see. Do you see what I see? Spittlebuggies, hello. Ercole De Stefano, hello. And for anybody I've missed, if I missed anybody and anybody in the future, anybody lurking, hello. And also, before I forget, because I often do, at the top of the chat box, if you will, put your gaze up there. There is a link to a fundraiser for a friend of a friend, Twisted Skipster's friend, Tracy. Tracy needs some help paying some bills after some life crisis. If you guys can spare a couple of bucks to throw her direction, it'd be appreciated. If you can't donate, that's fine. But if you can share that out on social media, that would be appreciated. Okay, well, for some reason, the overlay, why didn't the overlay save with the correct title? Did I pick the wrong? Perhaps I did. Hold on a second here. Maybe I can fix this. Maybe I can fix this. Was that an alternate? Because I went to the trouble of making an overlay just for this show. I did. Let's try this one. Okay, hold on. I'm about to pull a magic trick. Are you ready? Okay, keep your eyes on the top left corner of the screen. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Aha! There we go. The magic of television, ladies and gentlemen. What can I tell you? The magic of television. Yes, so tonight's presentation, the title is what caught me. Abolition as a survivor-centered response to harm. Now, little known fact, but before these broadcasts each week, I tend to practice what my introduction is going to be on the subject or what drew me to the presentation or something like that, just so I can sort of have it hashed out. Because if you can't tell, these things aren't scripted. But at least I like to have some kind of sort of mental mind map ahead of time of what I'm going to say before I start one of these shows. And I did that with this show about 12 or 13 times, because every time I started saying, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, here's what we're talking about, I would go completely off the ranch into La La Land, just ranting about two subjects that are entwined, I assume, with our topic tonight. And that is, first, the neo-abolitionist movement, which is to eliminate prisons, and restorative justice. Boy, oh boy, do I have a lot to say about those subjects, even if I don't have a video. I could do a whole video just ranting about them, I suppose, but I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm going to withhold. I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to rein that in and let the speaker guide my focus. But that aside, I'm at least going to explain why the title drew me in, as brief as I can. I know it's already too late. Abolition, as in, I assume, If I'm wrong about this, I'm happy to be corrected. But abolition insofar as abolishing prisons as a survivor-centered response to harm. Okay, let's just think about that for a second. We're in a world without prisons, okay? Or some reduction of incarceration for crime. And I, hypothetically, am a victim of a crime. Let's say an assault. Let's say an egregious assault of some kind. And I am told, we've caught the guy, and we know who did this to you. And I'm like, great. And then I'm told, and they're going to walk free no matter what happens. Okay. Now, maybe that's an extreme interpretation of whatever the presentation is about, but that's sort of what comes into my mind when I read that title. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm asking the question, how? How is the elimination of prisons a survivor-centered response to harm? That is the mystery I want to have answered by our speaker tonight. That is what drew me in to this presentation. And so, without any further ado, aside from the fact that tonight's bingo card is bingo card C. C as in cash. That's Johnny Cash for Folsom Prison Blues. That was the selection off of the survey, or the poll, I should say, on Twitter this afternoon to choose tonight's bingo card. The links are in the description of the video. If you'd like to join in on selecting the bingo card each week, you can follow me on Twitter there. Or sorry, I have to change that, don't I? It's no longer, you can follow me on X. Scribe_light on X. I feel like there's something slightly naughty pay-per-view kind of 1990s scrambled television when I'm saying it like that, but I don't know. So yeah, bingo card C's in the description there. A couple more hellos before I begin. Advocatus Diaboli, hello. Roger Reynolds, hello. Deco, hello. Ebony Williams, hello. Darren Root, hello. And did I miss anybody else? Sam Squatch, hello. And I think that's everyone. Again, if I missed you, if you're lurking, if you're in the future, good evening. All right, so this one clocks in at just a little bit over 13 minutes. It's a regulation TEDx. I'm going to start off with a few seconds for a sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it, and then we will proceed.
So thank you so much.
Whoa. Okay. Wait a second. What? Okay, first off, you guys hear that okay? Let me know in the chat. Secondly, for those of you listening at home or might be listening in your car or something, a title card has come up. It's a title card that does indeed include the title of the presentation as posted on YouTube, Abolition as a Survivor-Centered Response to Harm, but there's an extra part to it. There's a question above that. Our speaker's name is Sarah Laughlin, and then it says, but what about the murderers and the rapists, ? And then the title of the presentation as I understood it. Okay, now this is entirely me reading between the lines of a cookbook, but when you front load your presentation with that question, I don't know, to me it seems, maybe it's just me, to me it seems like that's almost in mockery of one of the most obvious concerns about the concept. It's almost like belittling what would be the first question most people would have about such a concept. So I don't know. Obviously, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what is meant by putting that question in there as part of the title, but already my brain is front loaded with all sorts of extra questions now. Okay, anyway, you guys hear it okay? Sounds good. All right, let's keep going. I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. I think I might have... that's good. All right. Is that good? That looks all right. Okay.
I just want to give a specific trigger warning for sexual violence, for interpersonal harm, and for state violence.
Oh, well, I am thus warned. My triggers have been warned.
And I want to invite everybody in the audience to do what you need to keep safe, knowing those are in this conversation.
Do what I need to do to keep safe. Well, if you're going to be expressing ideas and concepts through language, then the only way I can keep safe is either to leave the room or to plug my ears. So, okay.
I also want to label that the people, the names and details about people in this talk have been changed to protect them.
Okay. Well, it's good to know that you're looking out to protect victims of violence through conceivably abolition of prisons. Thank you, Ebony Williams. This reminds me of the bakery owner who was a prison abolitionist and she was robbed and killed. Very sad. I hadn't heard that one. Yikes. Okay. But yeah, I don't care what somebody's politics on the subject is, but yeah, that's a bit of dark irony there. Well, here's the question. Was she robbed and killed by somebody who was let out of prison previously? I don't know why I asked that question. I guess my morbid curiosity. Thank you, Ebony. Okay, well, our triggers have been warned, and the names have been changed to protect the innocent, as the old Dragnet would say.
Whenever I share that I'm a prison abolitionist, I'm asked the exact same question.
Uh-huh. I can already imagine what it is. Also, there's a baby. There's a baby in the audience. Uh-oh. Yes, what is that question?
It's a conversation that I've had hundreds of times at this point.
Excellent.
And regardless of the environment, regardless of the audience,
yes,
regardless of how much they do or don't buy in, I'm always asked the exact same question without fail in response.
I'm in all sincerity, I cannot wait to hear what her answer is. Because this is the same question I have asked on multiple occasions when discussing prison abolition or reading articles on the subject and so on. Very few proponents of prison abolition or restorative justice ever bring up a limit, like a line that can't be crossed, and at which point you do, then prison applies, or this process doesn't apply. Like, from this degree of felony down is only where this could possibly take place, and elsewise anything above that has to be treated with the utmost seriousness. Rarely is the case that I hear that kind of specificity provided. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what our speaker has to say. In human form, thank you so much. Restorative justice and abolition prioritize working with both victims and offenders to foster healing, a critical process that the current system often fails to accomplish. Hi, Scribe. Hi, Formy. Yes, possibly so. But here's the thing. The restorative justice process, as often described to me, requires the three components. It requires the offender, it requires the victim, and it requires community stakeholders. What if the victim does not want to participate? What if they do not wish to confront or be confronted by the person who harmed them or harmed their family member or whatever? And also, the restorative justice process, as I've had it described to me on multiple occasions, completely either ignores or doesn't even address due process. Like, how do you arrive at the restorative justice circle knowing that the person who is quote unquote the offender is actually the offender without them first having gone through a trial and so on, which most restorative advocates and obviously abolition advocates don't want there to be the criminal justice system as we know it already, with law enforcement, imprisonment before trial, and things like that. There's a whole bunch of pieces missing from the whole pitch, and that's been my sort of hesitation. I understand the potential benefits if you have people that come together over an offense, depending on what it is, and having some sort of meeting of the minds, coming to terms, and so on. That, in my mind, can make sense in some instances, but only with the full consent and participation of all parties involved. If anybody decides to fall out of that, then where is the justice part, let alone the restorative part? Okay, I warned before I started this, I had a lot to say about the subject, and Formy, genius as he is, has pulled it out of me regardless. By the way, if you don't know about Inhuman Form, go check out his YouTube channel. He's got videos on there about society and government and true crime and all types of stuff. He is an eclectic individual, and he's a friend of mine, and we've had several conversations and interviews on the channel before. So go check him out, go subscribe, and encourage him to make more videos. He's got work to do as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, there's a long advertisement for Inhuman Form. All right.
But what about the murderers and the rapists? We as a society are slowly coming to terms with the fact that our prison system simply does not work.
Okay.
Or rather, that it works exactly as it was intended to. to warehouse mental illness, criminalize trauma, and punish poverty.
Okay, well, I mean, if you're talking about, when I hear punishing poverty, I think about the cash bail system. And I have a lot of inherent problems with the cash bail system, but I'm also at a loss, given some of the alternatives that have been offered, as to whether there's a better way of doing it. And restorative justice, insofar as, say, alternatives to incarceration like drug court or diversionary programs, I'm not against, inherently, so long as I understand, like, where they apply and what circumstances they would apply to. So restorative justice and diversionary programs and alternatives to incarceration, again, depending on the circumstances, I might be all for. But prison abolition, that level of extremity, that's the part that I want to know the answers to.
And most centrally, of course, as an extension of slavery.
Right, an extension of slavery. That's where the abolition thing ties itself into.
And yet, even those who are aware that what we're doing is not working are hesitant to condemn the entire system. Because what about the violent crimes, the ones with the victims?
Yes, that is the thing. What do you do with someone who obviously does not care about the civil rights or safety of others and cannot obviously operate in a civilized society? Regardless of what you think of the system itself, if you have an individual that is willing to prey upon other people nonstop, what do you do with this person?
Sure, some people deserve a second chance, but other people need to be locked up, right?
Mm-hmm.
When people hear abolition, they envision burning buildings and anarchy, think that prison bars and barbed wires are what keeps our most vulnerable safe from our most dangerous.
Okay. Well, again, what are you pitching in the alternative?
But what if I told you that we've got it all wrong?
Mm-hmm.
That our prison system is the most insidious predator of all, and that it is packed full of survivors?
Okay. I can believe that there are people in prison who are themselves victims of crime. What do you suggest happen? Now that they've preyed upon other people, what?
You see, supporting prison abolition and supporting survivors are not at odds in the way we might think. In fact, abolition is the singular most survivor-centered response to harm that we have.
So wait, you're going to group together the people on the outside of prison who are survivors of crime in some way, shape, or form with people in prison who also happen to be survivors of crime. And you're going to say that destroying or getting rid of prisons is good for survivors of harm. And you're putting them all under the same category, as though those that didn't actually go and harm anyone are on the same level as people who did? Is that what I'm hearing? I'm not quite sure.
Long before I had the language of abolition, I had the experience of addressing harm in a restorative way.
Mm-hmm.
My first job out of college was working as a counselor at a residential program.
Okay.
Randomly, I was placed in the sexualized behaviors program, a residence specifically for young men who are system involved due to a history of inappropriate sexual behavior.
System involved? System involved. I love this softening of the language of terms. System involved. Okay. So wait, a history of. So they're repeat offenders, is what you're saying. Okay.
I was excited to have my first full-time job and didn't think much of it.
Mm-hmm. I somehow I doubt that. I'm going to go to the bingo card real quick just to both refresh myself and to remind ourselves what we're listening for. Plays victim. Remember, this is bingo card C. C is in Johnny Cash. Plays victim. Leaves out vital context. Well, I'm still waiting to hear what would you do with the rapists or the serial killers. Weightless example. Anecdote that probably never happened. Haven't had any yet, except for that one, I guess. Benevolent condescension. I'm still looking at that title card. I know I'm reading into it, literally and figuratively, but still. Self-vilification or wretchedness. No, not yet. Feminism. Childhood or family anecdote. I don't think she's talked about her childhood yet. No. Privilege. Sales pitch for product or service. I don't know if abolition counts as a service, but we are getting a sales pitch, so I guess we'll see. Microaggressions or unconscious bias. Patriarchy. Wage gap. Mind reading or assumes motives. Attempt to coin new buzzword or buzz phrase. System involved might count, but I don't know. We'll see. Word salad, diversity, equity, and or inclusion, marginalized or marginalization, contradicts own point or argument, systemic/institutional. Yeah, system involved. I think I'm safe in circling that one now. Excuse me. A list, and that has to be a formal list throughout the course of the presentation. White supremacy, argumentative non sequitur, and lastly, collectivizes own demographic. So besides systemic or institutional, I'm circling free space. So free space and systemic institutional are on the board. Also, thank you so much, Keeverdam. Got a new supervisor this week who is stricter than the last one, so talking will be even tougher. Also, I might get my car back tomorrow after almost a month of being in the shop. Holy cow. Well, first, good on the car. Second, apologies on the stricter supervisor. And don't worry, we know you're there. You're like the spirit of the stream. That's it, the spirit of the stream. Ooh, like the lady of the lake. Does that work too? Thank you, Keeverdam, so much.
They tell you not to pick favorites, but of course we all have them. Every counselor knows that there are certain clients that just stick to your soul in a special way. Mm-hmm. Like Anthony. Okay. Anthony was the most magnetic and chaotic child I had ever met. He was 15 years old and a petite kid, 5'0" with big brown eyes just dripping in eyelashes, but with energy big enough to fill any space he was in.
A repeat offender at 15? Yeesh.
When Anthony was in a bad mood, the entire room went up in flames. But when he was in a good mood and smiled one of his genuine toothy smiles, the whole world sparkled. Okay. He was also one of the most traumatized kids I'd ever worked with. Uh-huh. Though he was all boast and bravado during the day, at night he removed the mask and he shared pieces of his shattered reality. Okay, well, just as a preamble, if there is a place in sort of chronological time, in general terms, where I would see restorative justice practices being perhaps the most applicable and effective, it would be within the juvenile level of justice. Potentially. It all depends on what we're talking about, what crimes we're talking about, and so on. But still, if there's a time in someone's life where you're going to have the most effect on them formatively, obviously it's going to be in their younger years. So that's why restorative justice practices or theory being applied to educational situations like schools and such, or in the juvenile justice system, that area seems like the most ripe for trying to do something other than pure penalty or incarceration. So on that score, yeah, you can find me a fairly agreeable. Again, mileage may vary on the specific case. Watching his mom drink herself unconscious, going for days without food, being locked in the basement with his siblings. Yikes. DCF getting involved, being shipped from one foster home to the next, being touched without consent. Ugh. His short life was an endless cycle of abuse and neglect. Like many people who've struggled with trauma, Anthony had difficulty around sleep. Okay. And so we just developed this special bedtime routine that included soft humming music, his favorite fuzzy blanket, and me sitting in the doorway until he fell asleep. Okay. We're now almost 4 minutes in, and I'm still waiting for the primary question that she herself posed at the top of this to have an answer. I know, maybe she's building up to it. But still waiting. At night, I would see glimpses of the real Anthony. The real Anthony. Okay. The little boy desperately seeking comfort, safety, and joy. Okay. I'll never forget when I learned why Anthony was in the program. Everybody else knew, had already read his file, but I like to get to know our clients first before reading their chart. And so we were months into our beautiful bedtime routine when I found out in a team meeting that Anthony had raped his sister. Okay. Well, if I monetize these things, and I don't bother because oftentimes TEDx will just claim them anyway, I'd be demonetized now, but whether. Okay. Wow. So you waited months to know why he was there. Okay. It didn't compute. I couldn't believe it. Why? I mean, I'm not to be too cynical about it, but really, given the circumstances, given the environment, given the other clients you were working with, and so on and so forth, why? Were they sure they meant Anthony? I pictured him with his drowsy eyes smiling up at me from under his fuzzy blanket, and it didn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, welcome to your job, I guess.
Not only because it so deeply conflicted with the Anthony that I knew, but because it hit a nerve, triggered my own deepest trauma.
It triggered you. Okay, well, I think anybody hearing that story would be triggered in some way, shape, or form just on the basis of common civilization. But okay, thank you, John Miller. And this is her favorite client. Look, I have a hard time necessarily coming down entirely on a child, depending on the circumstance. I mean, that is a terrible and disgusting thing. But when you have a child and, you know, if they're, I don't know, that's such a messy situation. All right, well, I'm curious to know. Thank you, John Miller. I'm curious to know. All right, well, having found out that it's information and seeing him in the program, do you think he didn't deserve to be there then? Or did you think what was your interpretation of everything?
When I was 20 years old, just a year before accepting the job at the residential program and meeting Anthony, I was raped by two strangers in an alleyway.
Oh, for crying. Okay.
When the incident happened, my tectonic plates shifted, and I lost pieces of myself. I felt a deep sadness and a deeper sense of shame and isolation. So I told no one, and I swallowed everything.
Wait, this was while you were a counselor at this center? Did I really don't want to rewind and listen to that again if I don't have to, but was she saying that this occurred while she was still a counselor at the center? Okay.
When I found out about Anthony, all of my trauma came crashing back.
Okay. Spudgun says just before the year before. Okay, right before. Okay, pardon me. I in the intensity of the moment, I missed that part. Okay, so just before he became her patient, this happened. Okay.
The little box that I had so meticulously packed away was pulled to the surface and ripped open.
Well, okay, again, not to be too cynical about this. Given the institution you were working for and given the other clients, I'm assuming he wasn't your only client. Given the clients you were working with elsewise, why was this so shocking to you? You knew he'd done something, right, that dealt with sexual predation. You knew that because that was the random department you were placed into. So, okay, you didn't read his file. You didn't want to have any preconceived notions. All right, I don't know if that's standard procedure for a counselor, but okay. But then you find out, and then all of a sudden, this is like really that shocking to you? Okay.
After such a long time of intentionally repressing it, I was forced to face my trauma.
Wait, okay, sorry. All right, so you were a victim of a sexual crime. You work as a counselor for juvenile offenders under that same category of offense, and you told no one. This is one of those situations where it's like, oh, now you're blaming the victim. And I'm like, by not trying to get the people who did such a thing captured and identified so they can't do it to somebody else, there's no blame necessarily to be had in it happening to her, but what happens afterwards and the choices she makes afterwards, I hate these situations.
I won't lie to you. At first, it was absolutely brutal.
What was?
Trying to process my own sexual assault while being a counselor to people who had caused sexual harm to others challenged my empathy and my ethics.
Wait, none of that occurred to you before the revelation about Anthony? You were doing this work, or at least getting ready to, up to a year before you found out the truth about Anthony and working with other clients, and only then did it suddenly occur to you that there was a conflict here between what you were doing and your own personal decisions? Okay.
I cried a lot, both in work and out of work. I had my first panic attack and then a few more.
Okay.
I broke down physically, my body too heavy with all I was carrying, and had emergency back surgery at 22 years old.
Okay.
It was a painstaking, messy, and arduous point of my life, and I wasn't sure if I would make it through or what the other side would look like.
All right, just a little bit of full disclosure here. Well, full disclosure insofar as still maintaining some anonymity. I have very close family members and have had very close friends who have been the victims of sexual assault. And depending on who we're talking about, they handled it in different ways. And in each instance, I was always obviously outraged that anything had happened to them. And also, in some instances, mad that nothing seemingly ever happened to the people that committed these things. And that's the part that always gets me the most. But unfortunately, when it comes down to it, the only witness you have to these things oftentimes is the victim. And the idea that you have somebody out there roaming the world, whether recent or in the past or something, who got away with harming someone that you love and no justice will befall them, is so frustrating. And oftentimes it is possible, and I've been guilty of it as well, of transferring my anger about the person having gotten away to the choices or lack of choices made by the person that I love in the aftermath of such an event. It's a very, I don't use this word very often, that's not in a mocking manner. It's a very toxic balancing act of trying to, in my own mind, deal with what I'm hearing from people that I care about. So obviously it's a very touchy issue. I don't know. I don't want to come across as I'm being too sanctimonious against her, because obviously her situation is her situation and so on. But I also have, I don't know, a lot of built up frustrations and opinions over the course of many years about situations in my own life where I just feel like, if something like that happens, you have to say something. You have to say something. I obviously I can only imagine the embarrassment or the shame or the fear and on and that. I know. But man, I just wish more people would just, try to overcome that in some way, shape, or form for, the benefit to society and any future victims. Because that stuff is just, anyway. Oh man, I picked a doozy tonight, didn't I?
But I learned that the greatest growth happens in the deepest spaces of discomfort. Though I was suffering, I was also living my way into an illuminating truth.
Okay.
As I processed my own trauma, I noticed this thin string that was tying all of my clients' stories together into an unmistakable web.
I could be a little bit sarcastic here and try to define exactly what that string was connecting them all together, but I think you've probably already answered that question for yourself now.
Every single one of them had been a victim before their offense.
That does not excuse harming others. I'm sorry. That does not excuse harm. Because somebody else did something terrible to me does not then give me a free pass on harming somebody else. All right. The golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So unless you're an absolute sick psychopath, sociopath, or something, but even then, that does not give you a pass. Okay. Now, at the age of the clients that you are seeing, that is probably the best chance you have to divert them from continuing in that behavior into their further adult years. But that doesn't excuse what they did.
Every single one of them was a survivor.
And then they inflicted harm on someone else and created a survivor.
Just like me.
They were not survivors just like you, unless you then, after your own traumatic incident, went off and traumatized somebody else. I'm sorry, there are two different categories here. There really are. And that's personal choice. That's personal responsibility for the actions you take. Not those that are inflicted upon you against your will. That's a whole other situation.
It's a revelation that I brought with me into my next job working as a counselor in prisons. MCI Norfolk is Massachusetts' largest state prison, a medium security facility south of Boston, housing around 1,500 incarcerated men, about half of whom are serving a life sentence.
Okay.
During my time at Norfolk, I worked with hundreds of clients, including a large number of murderers and rapists.
Okay. Still waiting for the answer to the question at the top of the show.
Like Dante. Dante was tall and slim and could always be seen wearing tight braids and a soft smile.
Uh-huh.
He was in his late 30s and 15 years into serving a life sentence for second-degree murder.
Okay.
5 minutes into our first ever counseling session, Dante completely broke down.
Uh-huh.
The levees burst and he sobbed, recalled watching his stepfather beat his mother, attempting to intervene and landing in the hospital, confiding in an aunt and being told to stop crying and be a man.
Wow. And if only Dante had taken the lessons of that trauma and grown up to be someone who did not inflict that same kind of pain on somebody else. Oh, well.
I watched as he crumpled in half in front of me and his tears bounced off of the linoleum floor.
Wow, were you an English major by any chance? Because I feel a kind of kinship all of a sudden.
When his sobs steadied to hiccups, he looked up at me and said, "Thank you. There's nowhere safe to do this in here."
Uh-huh.
As Dante shared, I watched him melt from man to boy before my eyes, and I saw Anthony.
Okay, all right. Yes, I could imagine that in a prison, it is not a safe place to show weakness of any particular kind. I've seen movies and heard stories, so okay. He felt like that place was a refuge for some emotional release valve. And so you saw a grown man, a convicted murderer now, as an innocent child. Okay.
I saw the end result of generational trauma, of untreated wounds, of deprived community.
What about the wounds inflicted upon his victim and the victim's family? Okay, you start this off by saying abolition is good for survivors of trauma. I have a feeling you're not talking about the victims of the crimes perpetrated by the individuals here, are we?
I also saw myself. I could feel how long he had been holding his story in, knew firsthand how saying it aloud for the first time felt like chewing on glass.
Uh-huh.
In that moment, it became crystal clear. This was not perpetrator talking to victim. This was two survivors breaking bread.
Okay. So, you found some kinship with his backstory and your personal backstory. Okay. You know, on a simple humanitarian compassion level, I will stipulate to that. Even the worst people in the world have conceivably, perhaps, the potential for humanity. It's not like every person who's ever committed a crime is a terrible, terrible person through and through. Okay. All right. How does that mean that there should not be prisons?
As wild as it might sound, I don't think I would have ever been able to address what happened to me without the help of my clients.
What if one of your clients was one of the people that inflicted the harm upon you? What would you want to have happen to that person? I don't know what her answer would be. Maybe it'd be something far more benevolent than I'm thinking of, but okay.
My sexual assault was senseless and disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
I came out of it with this deep fear of evil people like my assaulters, the ones who wait in the shadows ready to attack.
But what if they were survivors? I mean, conceivably, they too experienced, let's just say, massive amounts of trauma in their childhood and they're growing up ahead of time and everything else. So would you feel kinship with them if you were to confront them, I wonder?
And yet, in working with my clients, I was able to break down this notion of evil and see it for what it really is.
Okay.
A manifestation of pain.
So your assault was a manifestation of someone else's pain. Okay.
Healthy, supported people don't do evil things. Once I was able to detach from this misinformed notion of evil, I was able to cultivate hope again.
All right, we're now nearly 9 minutes into a 13-minute and 28-second presentation. The primary question at the top of the presentation which even she outlined as what she's asked all the time, still hasn't been answered. And what would replace the prison system has yet to be detailed.
Evil transformed from a cause into a result.
What?
This meant that work could be done to intervene, that people were not lost causes or destined to do harm, but in need of nurturing and resources.
And what should be done for those who are the victims of the crimes? This is going, I realize there's a couple minutes left. This is going in the same direction as most of the restorative justice / prison abolition things that I've looked at in the past. Almost no time is spent talking about what is best for the actual victims of the crimes. She is grouping together survivors of harm and making those the criminals. And while that may be true to some extent, maybe they are survivors of harm, inflicting the harm is the dividing line. You're not addressing that.
Rather than ever feeling afraid of my clients, they actually gave me back my sense of safety.
Okay. And does that then translate over to other victims? I mean, like I said before, when I was sort of ranting at Inhuman Forms comment, if a victim of a crime chooses to go through a process of restorative justice or chooses to contact their the offender in their case, whether it's something that was done to them, done to a loved one, whatever else, if they choose to find a way to seek understanding, forgiveness, whatever else, you won't find me stopping them or telling them they shouldn't. Okay, there was a God, what was it? It was just a couple of years ago. I suddenly forget her name, but the guy that was killed was Botham John, and he was in his apartment minding his own business, and then a police officer, a lady whose name I suddenly forget, she purportedly went to the wrong floor in the condominium building or whatever, apartment building, thought she was going to her apartment, opened up this guy's apartment, saw him in there, thought he was an intruder, and she was off-duty cop. She pulls her gun and shoots him to death. And then at the trial, after she's been convicted and everything, and I think before sentencing, the victim's cousin was on the stand, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said to the judge, my cousin would have wanted me to forgive the officer because that was the kind of guy he was. So, Your Honor, is it okay if I give her a hug? And I'll tell you what, I watched that live. That was being broadcast live. I saw that, and it really hit me hard because, just an absolute pure act of kindness and forgiveness, even in the face of something as horrible as that, really moving. And I was really struck by that kid's bravery and conscience about the whole thing. It's not necessarily something that I would have done, but I respected and admired him for making the gesture, even if it didn't solve anything, even if it didn't bring his cousin back and so on. I think it was his cousin. If it was his brother or something, I apologize. Either way, if someone chooses to do that of their own accord when it comes to the person or persons who have harmed them in some way, more power to you. But that shouldn't be required, and your personal revelation, I'm talking to our speaker rhetorically, doesn't mean that that's how everybody should think. But then I don't know where we're going because we're 9 minutes into a 13-minute presentation about abolishing prisons and how this is supposed to help those who have experienced harm. And what do we do about the serial killers and the rapists, which you still haven't answered?
In working with them, learning their stories, and supporting their struggles, I learned how to empathize with myself again. They gave me the context that helped me move from demonizing people to demonizing pain.
And what if the two guys that assaulted you went on to assault other people? Just continue to do it. Is their expression of pain what? Just ignorable or justified because of the harm they experienced growing up? What exactly are you getting to?
I've been working in jails and prisons for over a decade now and have come across hundreds of Anthonys and Dantes.
That kid is having the best time. I envy that child. That child's having a great time at this TEDx. I would not be.
Each person has a story that is uniquely theirs, but painfully the same.
Uh-huh.
Prison is saturated with survivors who the system serves only to violate again. As a survivor myself, I can't help but notice that rape culture and prison culture are one and the same.
Oh, boy. Uh-huh. Okay, well, I'm circling feminism because the whole rape culture shtick was a constant refrain back in the 2014 through 2015 rise in the feminism stuff. And if you want to know about the veracity behind that accusation, go take a look at the studies by Christina Hoff Summers and other comparable studies on that. Usually they quote the RAIN study of campus assaults and things like that and other stuff, and it's not exactly what they tell you it is.
Both are hyper-violent, thrive off of toxic masculinity and white supremacy.
Oh, white supremacy. Oh, boy, on the board. Toxic masculinity and white supremacy. Oh, boy. Okay, so the terrible things going on in prisons. Okay.
And work very intentionally to keep those with privilege and power while the marginalized are left voiceless.
Oh my gosh, privilege and marginal. Wow, we're just filling up the squares near the end here. I was thinking we're going to get much out of this one. Holy cow. All right, so privilege, marginalized. Dang, going through all the buzzwords. All right.
Both use shame and isolation as a tactic to discourage people from banding together and building community.
Shame and isolation. Yeah, why would we want to isolate violent offenders away from everyone else? You still haven't answered that question. You got 3 minutes and 28 seconds.
When you buy into the prison system, you fuel these forces.
Okay, so now you're just guilt-tripping anybody who thinks that violent offenders should be isolated away from civilized society as being supporters of white supremacy, toxic masculinity, and rape culture. Okay, well, you're not a great argument.
How can we hope to address these issues with a system that replicates them?
How do we hope to address these issues? Okay, so we've gone away from talking about criminal justice and what to do with violent repeat offenders, as your own, preemptory question posed. And now we're talking about abstract societal issues of questionable merit and how we're going to solve them with. Okay, I think we might have taken a detour here.
How can we say we support survivors when we subject people to state violence that creates even more of them?
What? You're not addressing the victims of crime. Okay? You're not addressing what happens, what should happen for Anthony's victim? What happens or what should happen for the family of Dante's victim? You're not addressing them. Do you think that those people, Anthony's sister, the family of Dante's victim, do you think they don't deserve something that looks like justice? What would you say is justice for someone who commits murder? You still haven't answered this. This was your question at the top of the show. Answer it.
Over 90% of people in prisons and jails will return to the community one day.
Uh-huh. And?
This means that the people we lock up will soon be our neighbors again.
Yes. Okay, and just as a note, I have absolutely no problem, and have advocated for it before, of programs and opportunities and institutions and so on being available in prison and after prison to allow people to re-enter society and gain skills to have the opportunity to rebuild their lives. I even saw, this is a long time ago now, but there was a DEI panel discussion where you had 4 ladies on a stage, and 3 of them gave the usual diversity, equity, inclusion rap at the time and everything. But then the 4th lady, she was talking about, well, in my company, diversity means a second chance program where we don't necessarily exclude someone from a job opportunity on the basis of a past criminal conviction, and that we give them the opportunity to, rebuild their life and da-da-da-da. I was like, okay, there you go. I'm fine with that. So, yes, a lot of people are returning. I don't think prison should be, especially for people who have finite sentences, just be nothing but penalizing. Opportunities should be provided, but ultimately, those individuals have to take those opportunities to change their lives. So,
rather than addressing any of the underlying causes of harm, prison serves only to exacerbate them.
How do you address the underlying cause of harm in someone that has already experienced it in the past? By the time they get to prison, if they came from an abusive household, how do you address the underlying cause of that harm? And which harm are we talking about? The harm that was done to them, or the harm they inflicted on somebody else to end up in prison in the first place? What do you suggest?
As one of my clients put it, the only thing I've learned in here is how to be a better criminal and a better fighter.
Okay, and so when that person gets out of prison, what choice are they going to make about the rest of their life? What choice are they going to make? And whatever choice they make, they will reap the consequences. I don't know what to tell you.
That doesn't sound like safety to me.
Well, then perhaps that person should rethink their life choices after they get out of prison. Okay. So what do you suggest in the alternative?
People do not heal in cages. Abolition seeks to interrupt these cycles both interpersonally and systemically.
How?
Abolition thinks about safety in a holistic and sustainable way.
Do you? Because you haven't even mentioned the victims of the crimes you have alluded to in your 2 examples. But okay, again I ask, how?
Rather than focusing on the individual, abolition steps back and looks at the community.
All right. How?
Paying less attention to the bad apples and more to the roots of the tree.
So you're going to ignore the actual criminals and perpetrators, and you're going to ignore the victims and look at the roots of the tree. Okay. How? Give me an example. You've got 2 minutes left. Give me an example of the root of the tree in a hypothetical community and how you would address it.
How might our reaction to crime shift if we understood harm as the result of unmet needs?
How would our reaction to crime, reaction to unmet needs? Okay, what were the unmet needs of the 2 men who attacked you? And how could we as a community see to their needs to prevent them from doing that again? Okay, and just as another note, and I know I've been putting a lot of disclaimers on here, but this is a unique circumstance. It is a rare day when it comes to TEDx that I ever bring up the speaker as an example in the course of my critique, like them themselves, not their words, but like them or anything else about them or anything else. But unfortunately, for the sake of this one, both in the occurrence of the event and also for the sake of the presentation, our speaker has made herself an example in her own argument. And that is almost always and only the circumstance under which I'll ever bring up the speaker as an individual when I'm making any commentary, but I can't avoid it here. So that's why I bring that up. And I bring it up because she brought it up. And so the people that attacked her did so because they weren't having their needs met. So I have to ask, as rhetorically and as cynically as I can, how would our speaker suggest those two individuals' needs be met by the community to prevent them from taking such action again in the future? Because this is her pitch. And I have to wonder. Thank you, Mr. Tickletrunk. Roots of the tree equals the perpetrator's parents? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but she's talking in a broad scope community, not look at individuals, but look at the whole community. Like, so it's the community's fault that someone went off and did this to you? Okay, well, what would you do to address it? What in the community in which this occurred, what would you suggest be done? Okay.
How might our systems of accountability change if we understood violence as an expression of pain?
I don't know. How should they change?
Abolition seeks to repair instead of punish.
Okay. How would you be repaired? From what happened to you in this proposal, how would you be repaired? What kind of reparation would you seek to occur?
This does not mean excusing harm. No, abolition is deeply rooted in accountability.
How? You really, really need to start giving some details. You don't have much time.
But what this means is addressing harm in a way that actually stops it from happening again.
I'm a broken record. How?
What this means is addressing harm in a way that is community-centered and survivor-led.
Which survivors are you talking about? Community-centered. Since you've already grouped together both criminals and the afflicted, let's say, as all being survivors at the top of this, which survivors are you talking about? Or do you mean that both are supposed to be counted on the same level, both the offender and the victim in this process?
This work might seem overwhelming or overly imaginative.
No, see, here's the problem. I'm not hearing any imagination. I'm hearing a bunch of wishful thinking. I'm hearing a bunch of abstracts. Imagination would be to say, okay, well, let's imagine a situation where the two people that attacked me were recipients of or involved with such a process as I propose. What would that look like? How would I achieve some kind of healing from this? What would I want to see insofar as accountability for these two people? That would be, some kind of imagination. I'm not getting any of that so far. I'm getting a bunch of empty promises and abstracts.
But it's far from new.
Oh, you're right. No, it's not a new idea. I've been talking about it for at least 7 years or so.
Indigenous cultures have been practicing non-carceral responses to harm for thousands of years.
Yep, and I've gone over those before too. I had a whole TEDx where a native justice practitioner went through what her tribe, I believe it was, or her, indigenous nation used as a process and everything, and it was all very, again, convoluted and abstract. But okay, so I hate to bring this up, but unfortunately our speaker opened the door. If indigenous justice practices have been going on for thousands of years and truly are the panacea to our broken carceral system, then the crime rates in indigenous communities must be completely through the floor, correct? I mean,
There's an abundance of brilliant Black feminist scholars like Angela Davis and Miriam Kaba who have been studying and advocating for abolitionist policy for decades.
yes, I know. I know they have. What does their race have to do with it?
There are nations and communities all over the world who model for us what non-punitive justice systems can be.
Yes, and what's the population density of those countries? What are the terms and conditions of those countries to begin with? Are they one-to-one comparisons with American society and population?
As abolitionist scholar Ruth Wilson Gilmore says, abolition is about presence, not absence.
That means absolutely nothing. What do you suggest be done with the serial killer? You asked the question at the top. It was part of your presentation. You need to provide an answer. Whether it's an answer that I agree with or not, whether it's an answer that makes any sense to me or not, is beside the point. You asked the question. It is a question asked of you every time you have this conversation. You said so yourself. What is your response?
It's about building life-affirming institutions.
Life-affirming institutions. Like what?
We don't have to have an exact understanding of what this future will look like to know.
Okay, so wait. Sorry, let me put my glasses down for a second here and rub my eyes. Okay, so these practices have been employed by Native American and indigenous cultures for thousands of years. Black women scholars have been advocating and discussing these things for decades, but we don't have, a specific idea of what it might look like. Why not? Why not? Why can't you bring out a chart, lay it out for us? I mean, the lady that I did the TEDx on that was actually a restorative justice practitioner in her indigenous community, she had a whole chart showing the process in kind of a circle, wavy way. Let me back up a little bit.
Farming institutions. We don't have to have an exact understanding of what this future will look like to know that what we're doing is not working and it's time to build something new.
Okay, here's the thing. I am, as an individual, completely open to justice reform. Okay, if you're talking about justice reform, I'm all there, right? Just like I've said, the immigration system needs to be reformed. It's obviously not working because we keep having these Band-Aid little slap-on new rules and policies that keep getting challenged by the courts and so on, as legal, illegal, unconstitutional, or otherwise. So, yeah, if you want to pitch to me prison reform and get down to the nitty-gritty of what should change or what needs to be done or something else to try to reach a better outcome for ex-convicts and everything, fine. But you're not talking about prison reform. You're not talking about changing the system. You're talking about abolishing it. And you haven't even gotten specific enough to tell us what takes its place. What do you do with the serial killer? What do you do with the two men who attacked you?
The reason that I talk about abolition so much, the reason that I bring it into every single space that I'm in is because it's my responsibility.
Abolition is your responsibility. Okay.
And now it's all of yours too.
No. I am not responsible for abolishing the prison system willy-nilly without an explanation of exactly what takes its place. No, I'm sorry. That just, you have not sold me. You may have sold me on the idea that the prison system needs to be reformed. And that's an opinion that I've shared in the abstract for most of my life. But abolition is a completely separate subject, and you have not even detailed what that would look like. And in fact, it sounds like you don't even know what that would look like. But you say that's what has to happen. But you don't know how it would work. And you still haven't answered the question about what happens to the serial killer. If
we seek to hold those who are responsible for violent interpersonal harm accountable, then we also must hold ourselves accountable.
Whoa. These things are not comparable. Someone committing violent interpersonal harm needs to be held accountable the same as I need to be held accountable for what? Okay, all right, sorry. I'm if you can't tell, I'm getting a little keyed up here. Thank you, Mr. Tickletrunk, so much. I now understand why you created the sacred bingo cards. Fascinating how many of these talks fall into similar patterns. Blind revolution abounds. I am open, as I've always said, I am open to having my mind changed. I am open, certainly, to having a new perspective on something that I've heard about before, come into my world and maybe alter my understanding of the argument, even if I don't agree with it. You know, the ability to entertain a notion without necessarily accepting it. I'm fine with that. What is more frustrating to me is examples like our speaker here and this presentation, is that the title, right? The title seemed to promise to me something new, right? I've heard in different presentations about how abolition and or restorative justice may be good for everybody. I've rarely ever seen it, as far as I can recall, anybody get so specific as to say the survivors of harm will be, a benefit. But now I know what she meant by survivors of harm. She's talking about the criminals. She's talking about the people that have inflicted harm. So I learned something new there. It's all about wordplay. And I feel a bit deceived, just a smidge.
For the deeply violent and feudal system that we uphold.
Hold on, let me back up a little bit because I cut her off.
Those who are responsible for violent interpersonal harm accountable, then we also must hold ourselves accountable for the deeply violent and feudal system that we uphold, enable, and perpetuate.
I am totally open to sales pitches and arguments for prison reform. Just speaking for myself, I don't know what her audience is, I don't know about anything else, but if somebody says, here's the problem with this prison system in this state or this community, and this is causing this, this, and this, and here's the evidence, and here's the proof, and here's my pitch to how to resolve it. I am open to any argument, any conversation about that, totally. But this isn't that. This is not that.
We must look closer at the things that we cling to in the name of safety and ask if they're actually helping or just causing more harm.
What do you do with the serial killer?
We are all responsible for creating a safer community.
Uh-huh. And so if I willfully allow a serial offender to walk the streets because they had a nasty childhood, what accountability should be bestowed upon me?
Our harm and our oppression have the same roots.
What?
And so our shared healing and liberation must grow towards the same light.
What?
Because abolition does not mean tear it all down. It means build something more beautiful.
I think you need to check your dictionary. I really think you need to check your dictionary.
For all of us, even the murderers and the rapists.
No.
Thank you.
No. Fail. Absolute fail. Big F, circled, big red pencil on the paper, fail. As far as this persuasive essay is concerned, absolute fail. You don't start off with your thesis statement formed in a question. Abolition, what do we do with the serial killer? And never answer it. No. And this obviously keyed me up quite a bit. Okay. Rough subject matter, not fun, but certainly as a presentation and what I had hoped I would hear something new about, not satisfying at all. Anyway, let's go to the bingo card. I'm going to go over it one more time by myself. And then if you have any arguments for squares to be circled, please hold on to them. I will get to you presently. Plays victim. Given the circumstances and the lack of details, I'm precluded for the one instance that she gave an example of her being victimized from saying that somehow that was fake. I don't have any reason to say that. Leaves out vital context. Yeah. How? Why? How and why? Well, how specifically? The why is also a little off. But anyway. Okay, weightless example. Weightless example. I mean, I don't know. My brain's a little melty right now. I'm sure there's something in there. Anecdote that probably never happened. I mean, she gave 3 anecdotes. What happened to her, Anthony, and Dante. Everything else was kind of an abstract. And I don't have any reason to disbelieve any of those stories. You know, none of them sounded like, you know, and then everybody clapped kind of situation. So benevolent condescension. The title. The title and the apparent unwillingness to actually answer the question and the obvious concern of any thinking person when confronted with the idea of abolishing prisons. And then also talking to the audience as though they're at fault and just ignoring the actual victims of crime. Did she ever talk about what the benefits were to the actual victims of these crimes in this whole process? No, she just merged together victims of crime and the criminals on the basis of shared trauma, except that somebody inflicted the trauma on someone else and the other one was the recipient. That part's always going to bug me. Okay, self-vilification or wretchedness. I never heard her diminish herself in any particular way. So no, I don't think so. Childhood or family anecdote. She never talked about her growing up or her family that I can recall, so I don't think so. Sales pitch for product or service. I know this is a bit of a stretch on a concept matter here, but yeah, she was pitching prison abolition. She was trying to sell. It was a sales pitch. It wasn't an effective one, but it was one all the same. Microaggressions or unconscious bias. I mean, yes, in her own confession up to the revelation about Anthony, right? The unconscious bias she had about people, about him, and then so on and so forth about making assumptions about other people and so on. So it was in there. It was a little light on it, but it was in there. Patriarchy, no. Wage gap, no. And just as a note, I've been thinking about the bingo card lately, and I've been wondering if there is a square that needs to be replaced or revised. Wage gap might be it, because it's not as much of all the rage these days as a subject as it used to be. So I'm not saying I'm going to replace it right away or something, but I'm open to suggestions for either a new square altogether or a different way of phrasing that, because people actually bringing up the actual wage gap theory doesn't happen all that often. And it seems a bit too specific, and I think it's become kind of a one-size-fits-all for anything dealing with economic disparity. So maybe there's a better way of putting it. Maybe I just did. I don't know. Mind reading assumes motives. Yeah, that we're all held accountable, that we're all at fault for this, etc., and so forth. Yeah, okay. Attempt to coin new buzzword or buzz phrase. Even though she said system involved or whatever at one point, that didn't really strike me as like something she was trying to promote. Word salad. Effectively the entire presentation, because it never led up to a point. I don't know how else to put it. It just kind of meandered along a whole bunch of stuff, but it never came down to, okay, there was a promise in the title, and that promise was never fulfilled, even partially. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. No, she never said the words. She said a lot of other words, didn't say that one. Oh, also, by the way, I totally missed it. I totally missed it. By the way, you know, something just happened on the board, and yeah.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
Right?
Yeah!
I just completely spaced. I was so involved in filling up my squares, I just completely spaced. Yes, we have a bingo. Diagonal from the O down to the opposite corner. All right, let's continue. Contradicts own point or argument. Yes. Just over the course of everything, there was, if not answering the question or fulfilling the promise of the title alone wasn't enough, then we just had gobs of like, okay, what do you do? Or abolition doesn't mean tearing something down. No, that is the literal dictionary definition. It means building something more. No. That might be restoration, right? That might be cultivation. No, but abolition is destroying the whole thing. Okay. Anyway. Okay. A list. Was there a list in this? I thought, I had thought that at least in a general sense, she would have given a list of things that need to change in prisons. I didn't really hear that. Just a whole lot of really high-level, amorphous kind of ideas. Argumentative non sequitur. I mean, how many were there? 90% of... Well, actually, you know what? The whole... I got sirens in the background distracting me. The tale of the guy who said, all I'm learning in here is how to be a better criminal and a better fighter. And like, okay, so why wouldn't you want... If that person decides to go out and commit more crimes, how is that supposed to... Or no, argumentative non sequitur is something she's got to bring up once and never come back to again. I'm blanking. Okay, I might need some help on that one. Lastly, collectivize his own demographic. Well, it was her argument that everybody, well, her and the people that she was seeing at the center and the criminals that she talked to, they were all survivors of trauma. And she made a lot out of collectivizing completely different demographics under a single banner. So I think I'm safe on that.
Bingo. What? Of course!
Okay, that's my attempt at doing the bingo card. I'm sure you guys have some arguments for squares to be circled. If I've missed you so far, please repost it, and I will get to as many as I can. I know there's probably a lot of opinions on this one, so let's what we got here. Let's see. Ebony Williams, when did she mention white supremacy? She mentioned that as part of what was being fermented within prison. She said toxic masculinity, white supremacy, privilege. She went through like a whole bunch of buzzwords in quick succession at one point, and white supremacy was among them. So that's where that came from. Mitch the Ripper, she probably doesn't even know that she's promoting tyranny, which would mean that the brainwashing works. Depends on, maybe I missed a comment in there somewhere. Let's see. Arguments for squares to be circled. Let's see. Self-vilification. Pissed off Shih Tzu. She felt guilty or that she was a bad person for feeling hurt when dealing with Anthony after finding out he was a rapist. I don't know if that's self-vilification, though. Is that... I mean... being surprised at the contrast between the person you thought you knew and what you find out they did, is that... I don't know. Give me another angle on that or a different example. I don't know. Advocast Daily. Dante and Anthony were weightless examples. They really were of no importance and simply existed to try to appeal to emotion. Ooh. Well, it really all, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just thinking about this for a second. It really all comes down to what was the example, what was the argument she was trying to make, right? The argument she was trying to make is that prison bad, prison does no good, prison just inflicts more harm, right? But yeah, but then she never offered an alternative. Like, okay, well, rather than what happened to Dante, what would you suggest in the alternative? In a abolitionist world, what should be happening to Dante? How should he be held accountable for his crime? You're right. Why bring up these two individuals if you're not going to compare and contrast what they're currently going through in the criminal justice system and what they should be going through in a abolitionist restorative justice system. So, yes, okay, you're right. Weightless examples, that works. So thank you, Advocatus. Let me update the card there without hitting the wrong button. Okay. What else we got? Pissed off again. She thought she was a bad person for feeling the trauma because Anthony was such a good kid and he was also a survivor also. See, I guess my hesitation is in trying to say somebody dealing with the aftermath of something like what happened to her and saying it's like some sort of, I don't know, like wretchedness, like I'm wretched. That's where I'm sort of, again, I am biased by thinking about my friends and family members who have gone through such assaults. And if they were to talk about it, even, okay, maybe I need a little bit more encouragement on that one. I feel like I'd be making us like devaluing her own response. Like, even if I disagree on her philosophy of abolition, which I obviously do, however she decides to manage what happened to her, I don't know. Maybe that's it. I'm hesitant to criticize it. Oh, Faithless is going for the big one. Plays victim. Her claiming it was her responsibility was a form of playing the victim of the burden society has placed upon her to fix it. Wow. I don't know. That might be a bit of a reach. Expand on that a bit more. Maybe. Mike R. Toxic masculinity is kind of synonymous with patriarchy, Scribelite. Well, no, toxic masculinity is often the argument from feminism. That's one of the feminist talking points. She didn't really talk about there being a male-dominated this, that, or the other. So that's, yeah, patriarchy may involve toxic masculinity as an accusation from feminists, but I don't know that that's enough. Ebony Williams, Scribelite, does her whole talk count as an argumentative non sequitur? She never brought up how getting rid of prisons would help the victims. Well, here's the thing. She never said victims. That's the important part, and that's what threw me off at the beginning. She said survivors of harm, and then she made the criminals themselves survivors of harm because, you know, whatever terrible upbringing they had then makes them survivors of harm. So technically, I hate to give credit to the wordplay on the part of the speaker for crafting the title the way she did, but technically she kept to her word of the title in that she focused on those that she classified as survivors of harm. I know, it makes me angry too, because she completely ignored and dismissed any consideration for the victims of crime. Derek Leroux, she needs therapy. Why does she think it's her responsibility? Is it like a hobby? Yeah. Mitch, anecdote that probably never happened. Not sure if it qualifies, but the fact that she used so many buzzwords at least suggests that her claims of her assault warrant further. But we are bound to what we know within the confines of the presentation. I in the absence of any other information, I'm not going to make speculation on that. It just nothing she said in my book qualifies as dwelling on that too much. Let's see. Faithless. She even tried to guilt the rest of us into joining her in her burden. Okay. All right. You know what? Okay. You got me. All right. Because I did make a comment at that one time. It's like it was her responsibility and everything. And, you know, okay. All right. Now you got me. You got me. In that instance, in that context, yes. So.
Oh, won't somebody please?
Bingo. B-I-N-G-O.
Okay!
Right?
All right. So there's another bingo. All right. Yeah. The plays victim part, that was the. Yeah, it all depends on the basis of circling the square. On what basis are we circling that square? That makes more sense to me. Let's see. Advocatus, her assault as a childhood family. No, it happened to her a year before she started seeing Anthony as a counselor. So it happened while she was an adult. Let's see. Anybody else? I'm open to arguments on a couple more, but I think we might have reached our limit. We got 1, 2, 3 bingos so far. Let's see. We're coming up on the hour and a half mark, which is where I usually call these things. So I think I might start winding things down. If anybody has a last minute argument, I'm open to it. Let's see. Jose Chacon, a list. She listed Dante, Anthony, and her life to the cause she is doing now. Nice try. I'll say nice try. Nice try. But with that, everybody, I want to call it here. This was a rough one, just on the subject matter alone and the frustration with the... I really wanted to hear the theory, okay? Whether I agreed with it or not, based on the implication... Always Sunny in Philadelphia. The implication of the title, I thought I might hear something new, whether good, bad, or otherwise. I'd hear something new about the subject, and I didn't hear anything new. And in fact, the thing that was not new to me that really frustrated me is the bait and switch over the idea of who the survivors were and completely ignoring the victims of crime. Not even bringing them up, except in the abstract, and not even alluding to how the entire process is supposed to help them with the abolition, the destruction, the removal of prisons from the process. So, programming note, I am in contact with other true crime content creators for future episodes. I don't have one I can tell you is coming up soon, but I'm working on it. Everybody's lives are so chaotic and so busy because of the work that they do and trying to turn these channels into careers and everything else and time zones and everything. So I'm doing my best, but it is a very, let me just say, eclectic community of people, all operating in different curvatures of reality, and sometimes just gotta be lucky enough to catch them at the right day, and I'm doing my best, but I'm working on it. Sunday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, will be another Sunday stream where I'll talk about a thing. I'm not quite sure what it'll be. And then later Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, will be the fifth episode of Book Review of the Vampire, where my friend Leonore and I are progressively going through the book Interview with the Vampire, after many years of her having read it and mine never having read it, and discussing what we learn within that book, just as a fun little aside and project for the channel. But with that, everybody, I'm going to call it here. Boy, oh boy, this was a rough one. First off, thank you, everybody, for joining me tonight and sticking with me through this as it was. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the fundraiser at the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. Really do appreciate it. Before I go, by the way, I have a Discord server. The link to that is now in the chat box. If you'd like to join the Discord, just click on that link. You'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. There, you just have to say hello and then also say the secret word, because the secret word will tell me and my moderators that you watch the stream. And today's secret word is abolition. Why not? But the dictionary definition, not her wishful thinking definition. So secret word is abolition. Everyone, again, thank you so much for joining me. If you have any other thoughts on this subject, because I know it's a heavy subject and a lot of people have things to say on this, not all the time in the world, please leave a comment on the comments afterwards if you would. Leave a like on the way out if you would as well. I appreciate it. Or a dislike. I can understand why you might tonight. And also be sure to check out In Human Form or Human Redacted on Twitter. But check out Inhuman Form. Check out his content. He's got some great stuff on there, true crime, society, and otherwise. And with that, everyone, again, thank you for joining me. I hope everyone here, all things considered, are safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.